All right, then, we've got quite a lot more insight into how things have went a little bit bizarre for Microsoft, especially with Redfall, because Phil Spencer's talked about it. It's actually pretty damn fascinating overall, and interesting that we've got such a tight feedback loop on this situation. Here's the deal, basically. Phil Spencer went on XCast, which is a show that Kind of Funny do, and here's essentially the highlights of what he said. There's nothing more difficult for me than disappointing the Xbox community. I kind of want to revisit our process. I think back to the announcement of 60 FPS. That's obviously with the actual console itself. And then we weren't shipping 60 FPS. That was kind of our punch in the chin, rightfully, a couple of weeks ago. The critical response was not what we wanted. One thing I'll fight is kind of what went wrong, because there's clearly quality and execution things that we can do. But one thing I won't do is push against the creative aspirations of the team. I'm not going to force our teams to only make one kind of game when they want to make something different. So that's the thing where a lot of people would see that, think of Arcane Austin's prior output and think, maybe do you think there's a difference between ZeniMax's leadership, given the sorts of projects that got pushed in a certain era of ZeniMax? Do you think there's maybe a disconnect between that and what their teams actually want to do and are good at doing? Because Redfall makes absolutely no goddamn sense when compared to the pedigree of the team that made it, which kind of tells you that something is up. And ultimately, a part of leadership here, like, yes, you don't want to force your teams to make one kind of thing, but you also can't pussy out of actually being a leader and having a vision. Because if you don't do that, then yeah, you'll be rudderless, visionless, right? You'll be in a situation where people think of an Xbox first-party game and nothing particularly comes to mind because there isn't a clear vision, right? So that's where it's like, yeah, that's the good soundbite to say, but let's think about this in a more sort of, a kind of strategic sort of angle. Anyway, he goes to say, I'm a huge supporter of Arcane Austin. I think many of us are. Prey and Mooncrash, absolutely fantastic. And of course, they've worked on many other great titles that the overall Arcane umbrella's put out. This is one where the team didn't hit their own internal goals when it launched. I think it may be a bit simplistic to say if you would have just delayed it 3 months, then the core creative of the game would have delivered in something different than what it was. You see, nested within that statement is basically saying we couldn't have polished this up to be good because the idea is shit. And I know that's kind of putting words in his mouth. And yes, it would be too simplistic to just say, delay it and game better. I think the point is that there's a degree of being out of sync here. And ultimately, you look at the AI in that game. Any gameplay designer working in that knows that's a problem. I have to wonder if the issue here is almost, Phil Spencer's the general. And in a lot of cases, problems happen because of the distance between the general and the front line. Obviously, we're not talking about literal distance. We're talking about layers of communication, right? How much Phil actually understands it's not just Phil. In this case, it would probably... you would have thought it would have been Matt Booty, but as we'll find out, it's not Matt Booty. But the point basically is, how much does leadership actually know what the boots on the ground experience is like for people at their company? Because usually when things go bad, it's because of a complete disconnect. That is a disconnect that leads to expectations not aligning, and it leads to a situation where Phil can say this, where he can say this statement and think it's sort of reasonable. And in a way it is, but just saying they didn't hit their own internal goals, it would be, but it's like anyone at that team probably could have told you that. And they were probably trying to send the alarm up the chain that they weren't ready to go. That's typically what happens. Just about everyone in the press gets leaks. And it's always just the people working in the team who know what's going on because they're working on it day to day, just saying, this is fucked, yo. This is screwed. But then the problem is, why do management not act? Why are management seemingly unaware of what would appear to be a obviously An obviously sort of foreseeable reality. Anyway, goes on to say that they're taking near-term feedback, they're working in 60 FPS, they have a good timeline for that, they're committed to getting that done, and they're going to continue to work in the game. We've shown a commitment to games like Sea of Thieves and like Grounded to continue to go and build games. But ultimately, I know these games are $70, and I take full responsibility for launching a game that needs to be great. That's ultimately it. Redfall, look, it's a piece of shit. Its gunplay is awful. Its enemy design is awful. Its world is barren and devoid. Like, as an overall game, it's a total piece of shit. It's really bad. It in no way lives up to what Arcane Austin have done before. But as we're going to find out, maybe the point here is Phil and Phil's leadership team, maybe they're taking reports from ZeniMax. I think they're certainly not taking reports from Arcane. We'll find out soon. Point is, the amount of disconnect. How did this happen? Why wasn't it delayed? And this is what's crazy. Phil said that they had mock reviews that suggested the game would be double digits higher in aggregate scoring. How the fuck did that happen? Now, I'm assuming that because Arcane have made great stuff, that they probably have a good studio culture that doesn't involve drinking the Kool-Aid and being deluded. Because this makes no sense. If you see the mock review that you've got from a mock reviewer, but then you also see that the game is basically terrible. Anyone can see those mini-bosses that basically don't do anything. Anyone can see the broken AI. Any of those problems. Again, the thing here is stuff that just doesn't pass the most basic logic. And in my mind, the only explanation for that is a disconnect between leadership and the boots on the ground experience of working at this company. A lot of this is because of the impression that Microsoft are very hands-off with their acquired studios, that they have been for the ones that they've acquired through the end of the last generation and the start of this one, where basically they buy these companies wholesale, they are like, okay, that's a good company, we've bought them, now they'll make games for us. And the thing there is, Microsoft, in one way, they're good at grand strategy. You look at Game Pass, you look how they have been able to have, you could say, a degree of outsized performance compared to how much they've been struggling in console sales versus Sony. But while they've been succeeding in that part of grand strategy, the other side of it, because they've been good at the power play of just the sheer, look how goddamn good this deal is. Look how you can get Xbox anywhere. But hearts and minds, culture, that is what they have ceded to Sony, because they do not seem to have, they basically seem to have a very strong grand strategy on business, but they do not seem to have a strong strategy on cultural impact and content. Now that's kind of tricky because they're in the content business. And I think they acquired these companies with the goal of more content, but it's not just about more content, because obviously they're managing to fail both on quality of content and quantity of content, whereas Sony are succeeding on quantity of quality content, which is pretty rough. Now, to keep on going, we're sort of finding out that Microsoft are actually being so hands-off that management may not even be aware of what's going on with their game developers, other than just being asked for funds and wider marketing integration. And here is what notable industry leaker Jeff Grubb has said on one of his most recent streams. The understanding is that the way it works at Microsoft is they don't change anything. They let studios just keep doing what they're doing and barely interfere at all. We know, interfere. They barely manage it all. It's like, well, the managers that were there before, we hired them and they're still managing those studios. Now, here is where that is a really stupid idea. And I know it's like, I'm not really in a position to say this, but I do think that there's a point here. First party and third party are different. First party and third party decision making are different, right? If you take a third-party publisher and bring them in under the first-party fold, and you have them continuing to operate with the same decision-making, etc., as a third party, then you're not going to win the first-party game. The management from ZeniMax, they're used to being a third-party publisher. They have different sort of macro strategic goals to somewhere like Microsoft. So ultimately, Microsoft is acquiring assets, but Microsoft are not actually leveraging those assets in a way that's just going to make sense with a coordinated first-party strategy. They are essentially throwing the first-party exclusive label onto a bunch of third-party studios, if they're effectively being managed like that. And when I say third party, I mean culturally third party. And you may say, what does that mean, first party versus third party? Well, Sony, as an example, can afford to probably, like, they can afford to spend dumb money in video games, like so much money, whatever, or delay a game forever, or have Naughty Dog do 1.5 games a generation if they wanted to, whatever, it doesn't matter, because those things are so important that they're system sellers. Sony have strategically deployed their first-party studios to maximize their console market share. Microsoft is failing to do that because it's just these run-of-the-mill games. It's like, yeah, Grounded or whatever, that's fine, but it's not a system seller because you're not. You see what I mean? They're not playing the right game with the assets they've acquired. So, like, if they, say, get Activision Blizzard, right? They get Call of Duty, they get World of Warcraft. That's, like, really great for loads of things. But it's like, if you had, say, the development talent of Blizzard, but you weren't forced to do to be all Bobby about it, and you could maximally deploy that talent in order to gain market share in the console space, you'd probably make different decisions. That's some of the point that I make. As an example, this game, Redfall, was going to be a multi-plat, live service, with a cash shop. Now, the cash shop stuff went away, but that is the overall line of thinking that, that went into it. I mean, it's kind of funny then. You look at Halo, where Microsoft kind of shot that in the back of the head by not having a particularly strong first-party oriented strategy, and they humongously took the L on what should have been the system seller that propelled them into this generation. So, again, I bring it back to this sort of notion that Microsoft have an incredible business strategy with products, amazing offerings like Game Pass. And they're really, really good at doing that. But the actual content strategy is the bit that's messing up. And the sad thing is, when you actually look at some of their internal stuff, like with Age of Empires, like they're showing that stuff can go well. But of course, you look at 343, that's a Microsoft studio that they founded, and yeah, kind of a shit show. But again, 343, that's from an older era of Microsoft. With that said, let's talk about some more of their strategy then. One of the things that Phil talked about with Kind of Funny is the way in which they need to change their process around freshly acquired games and teams. Basically framing of like Xbox game, it's one they inherited but didn't commission, but the point is it's an Xbox game. People have higher expectations. Ultimately, Xbox didn't do enough to help Arcane Austin. Here's what he says: we didn't do a good enough job early in Arcane Austin to really help them understand what it meant to be part of Xbox and part of first party, and really use some of our internal resources to help them make the kind of move along that journey even faster. So we kind of just left them to work in the game. It's like, yeah, a game that was commissioned to be a big old, basically like, hey, we got a Fallout 76, and eventually it wasn't, well, it's the same era of commissioning Fallout 76, Wolfenstein Youngblood, where they're like, hey, Machine Games, you know the way you can make a really good first-person experience? Boom, we've shot you in the back of the head and damaged the new Wolfenstein brand. So it's like they inherited that decision-making and didn't pivot away from it. Again, content strategy. It's weird to me, man. Now, they do say they've done a better job with Starfield, which nobody should believe until they're playing the game, but the game was in an earlier stage of production and it was easier for us to swarm in, and we should have been there for Harvey and the team earlier. Also from Jez Corden, we can get some insight here, basically into the way which the merger's been playing out. Basically because, per that and Phil's statements, Microsoft basically didn't engage with Redfall. They stepped away. They just said, they even said, don't worry about a PlayStation build, right? They sort of took that away. Here's a quote: I've been told by multiple sources Xbox was entirely hands-off with that project, and the game doesn't fall under Xbox Game Studios director Matt Booty's responsibilities, because rightly or wrongly, right now, Arcane is not an Xbox game studio by internal definition. It's annoying, because one of the easiest things that lots of people, whether you like them or not, would have been able to understand is MCU, strong coordinated strategy. DC Universe, big shit show, headless chickening going on. A lot of people said, like, okay, you know, what's he called? Kevin, we'll call him Big Kevin at Marvel. He had, and his team, they had a strategy, coordinated content strategy, where they were hands-on with crafting all the things up to the Infinity War and the Endgame, and it worked. And DC was just, mess. That's like, I know that sometimes it's like you lose a lot of meaning when you just jump straight to analogies, but it kind of feels like that. And again, I talk about coordinated content strategy, and perhaps you could say Marvel versus DC in that previous era. That was a really good example of strong versus weak coordinated content strategy. Kind of interesting to look at parallels and learn lessons from other industries. So essentially, you've got Xbox Game Studios under Matt Booty, which is your Age of Empires, Forza, Flight Sim, Halo, that kind of thing. Those are under like the sort of Xbox management. And then there's Bethesda Softworks. They're a separate body, right? Like in the sort of corporate structure. Not really playing by the same rules. They are operating as a separate entity, which is not great considering some of the decisions that they made prior to the acquisition. Because a lot of the decisions that they made were basically saying, okay, now look, Fallout 76 eventually turned around well, but it's like kind of a miracle. I mean, fair play to them for turning 76 around, and that's actually a game, I think it's one of those games, a lot of people would be surprised by how successful it is. I think it's just successful in its own little corner of the internet, and the rest of us don't hear about it much. But again, like, Fallout 76, big risk, big launch disaster. Wolfenstein Youngblood, big launch disaster. Redfall, big launch disaster. They have kind of mismanaged a lot of stuff. Leaving them to manage this to their own devices really doesn't seem like the best of moves. Now, that being said, it could be that Microsoft saw, okay, we tried to go way too hard in studios. We were known as a studio killer in the past. We made mistakes in the prior generation. You all know, maybe in a movie or TV, the idea of like, oh, we've been acquired. New managements came in and fired everybody, and now the culture is different, and we hate our new corporate masters. Microsoft were probably keenly aware that they didn't want to do that, but perhaps they overcorrected to the point of just having spineless leadership. And it's like not even spineless leadership because they are particularly spineless, it's just absent leadership. It's no leadership because their strategic decision was to let them lead themselves. To keep on going then, so basically they were keeping up their processes rather than being kind of like the Xbox standard. There's no loss of autonomy or internal identity to cause friction post-acquisition, but they can still have integration with technology teams, marketing team. So that's, again, this is actually something, this is a strength that's turned into a weakness. Because it's that marketing team that makes Redfall feel like a big Xbox exclusive. You know, one of the two Xbox first-party exclusives we're getting this year. Now look, I'm actually dead excited for Starfield. I think it's probably going to be pretty great. Maybe I'm deluded for thinking that. Maybe I'm stupidly hopeful, but whatever, that is what it is. But certainly to have a success rate of, their best score is going to be 50%. You know, a loss and a win. It's not particularly great. Now, did this actually work before? Because we got the example of Mojang with Minecraft, right? Where they were acquired, they run themselves pretty much. So it could be the success of that model of Minecraft. That's why Microsoft have felt comfortable sort of extending this. Mojang is actually what they apparently call a limited integration property, essentially operating independently with Microsoft providing marketing and, sort of support like that. Now, what Jez Corden points out, though, is that this is still being subject to issues. There's a few examples. Microsoft made a really big song and dance about the Minecraft Super Duper graphics pack. They commissioned a musical in order to advertise ray tracing on the Xbox version of the game, and then Mojang cancelled the pack because it wouldn't work at the fidelity they needed. And I remember sitting there in my Series X with Minecraft thinking, how do I get ray tracing? I'm so confused. And yeah, it was because Microsoft confused me with their marketing. I would also say the development pace of Minecraft is shockingly slow. Minecraft Legends has not worked out particularly well. I personally would consider Minecraft to be a massively underexploited property. Lack of distinct failure is not evidence or is not proof of, I'm going to say this in businessy terms, but it's not proof of successful exploitation of talent and IP. I think that Minecraft could probably be more. I mean, Now, this is really awkward because with Hytale, they had a pretty significant delay, but you even look at how Hytale exploded onto the scene humongously with its trailer, and I think that was just showing an absolute hunger for that kind of voxel Minecraft-inspired game, but with way more, which Mojang have not been able to deliver. You look at the development pace of recent Minecraft updates, and you just think like, Jesus, how does it take this long? I'm so confused. I don't get it. I don't get it. Again, it does feel like they could get more with that, but maybe from their past, Microsoft is afraid of intervening too much and destroying the good thing that they definitely do have. Now, when you overall look at output, Deathloop got an 88 on the Metacritic. Psychonauts 2, an 87, Ghostwire Tokyo, 75, Grounded 82, Pentiment 86, Hi-Fi Rush 87, Minecraft Legends 71, Redfall 63. This tweet saying basically Arcane had a misfire, we're all panicking. Here's the thing. None of these have had the significant first-party premium brand value cultural impact, should make an acronym for that the PlayStation releases have had. Right, that's number one. Also, for so many PlayStation exclusives of a certain tier of blockbuster, the Microsoft answer has been nothing. Right now, I think Hi-Fi Rush is incredible. Love it. Is it going to, sort of compete at that strong cultural level? No. It's like a lot of these, do you know what they feel like? I mean, even, like Deathloop, that's a multi-platform game. I played it at PS5. But like a lot of this is just, oh yeah, these are just standard multi-plat third-party games, and we've slapped Xbox Studios on it. That's what it feels like. So, I do think that in this tweet from Ivan, there's like a lot of truth, but I think there is the broader perception of Microsoft that we need to engage with, because yeah, this is true. But if that's true, why are Microsoft lagging behind in sales? Why are they lagging behind in cultural capital? That's the sort of thing that's, strategically they're kind of in for. Now, the thing is, the Microsoft properties that I've cared about the most are like Halo and Age of Empires. So I've had, Halo Infinite, I think it's a marvelous game. Anytime I play it, I really enjoy it. I wish there was more, though. And Age of Empires, between Definitive Edition and everything, they have shown that IP, the love and reverence that it deserves, and it is just an absolutely amazing time to have been a human that 20 years ago played a hell of a lot of Age of Empires 2. Like, that's great. And, if Microsoft if we could have that approach, wrote large, we'd be off to the races. So, sort of thing, Redfall. Have we excused it? No. Have we explained it? Yes. And that means, what is the future path for Microsoft, right? Ultimately, reasons be damned. It happened under their watch. It's their L. They have Starfield. That's really good, but Sony do have a strong answer to that in Spider-Man 2. I think what's going to be really big is the Xbox Showcase. Now, there's the Xbox Showcase, and then after that, there is a ZeniMax Direct or whatever. No, Starfield Direct, that's it. We're going to really see a lot of Starfield. So, Fable, Avowed, some of those bigger bets, Like, if Microsoft can make Avowed feel like a true Xbox Studios, big, ambitious, blockbuster, incredible level of polish and execution, then we're cooking, right? Then we're cooking. And also, could be, not to be too vulgar, but a lot of people could say, what if Sony have blown their load, right? What if they came out the gate super strong, but then, it's going to take a very long time to make a lot of these games. Will there be a bit of a lull where Microsoft's stronger, longer-term bets like Fable, where they come into play, and then when Sony doesn't have an answer? And I suppose that's the one thing that I do suspect. I think that Microsoft is going to be stronger late in this generation than they will be early, as they have been quite weak, early into this. So, overall then, what is Redfall? I think Redfall is perhaps the last bastion of ZeniMax, right? Of like old ZeniMax's questionable decision-making. I think this has been a big wake-up call. This has been, a bucket of ice water thrown on top of Phil Spencer, and I think now he's been activated, so to speak. And I think this has caused them to realize anything that is exclusive to a Microsoft platform, day and date Game Pass. I think they now understand. People see that in the same way that they're going to see the new Spider-Man game from Insomniac. And I think that means that they have got to change their greenlighting decisions. And, quite a lot of things there. But also, if this is just the last struggling pains, well, the thing is, Microsoft is a very large, successful company. I mean, hello, Sony. Oh, Microsoft Azure. There's Azure. It makes infinite money. I actually think it might be their largest, is it their largest revenue? Yeah, it's pretty damn big anyway. So the point here is, they can tank hits. They can tank hits that Sony cannot. Microsoft is a larger and far more healthy entity than Sony is. So PlayStation is hungry. PlayStation knows that they have a string of big failures. They're in for it, and it's going to be a struggle. Microsoft have all the money in the universe. They have acquired more assets than Sony have acquired. You could perhaps say that means that Microsoft have a really good long-term business strategy. I think they do with Game Pass and all of that. And that they've had the assets, they haven't allocated them effectively because they've been running on prior plans that maybe haven't changed as much. But now this might force them to wake up and actually deploy what they have better. At least that's sort of what I think. But the big news is going to come June 11th. We've got Starfield Direct, which I'm very excited for. Xbox Games Showcase, which I actually am kind of excited for. Look, if we see some of the new Fable game, I'd be really, I'd be keen. I'd be keen to see what they come up with there. And like as the tagline says, this is the day gamers have been waiting for to see what's coming to Xbox, PC, and Game Pass. Remember when they talked about wanting quarterly releases? Funny enough to kind of funny as well, in October 2021. Well, maybe this is where they actually get to show what they've got. Okay, now what we've got is The Pale Beyond, which, by the way, new update, new difficulty, more fair, more balanced, option to go way harder, but also more fair if you want. Save transfers from the demo, you can play for free over this event, which is Lunaricon May 4th to May 8th. You can play for free into the demo, then buy the game, transfer your save over, so you don't need to replay the prologue or anything. And yeah, it's also 10% off. So if you want to support us, The Pale Beyond is the way to do that. Other than that, thank you for watching, and ultimately I'll say this. Good luck to fill all the people at Microsoft. This absolutely shouldn't have happened, but if they wake up and, learn how things have not particularly went well, then, that's going to mean? That's going to mean they're more competitive in the space. That's going to mean that we get better games, and that ultimately is what we all want. All right, see you later.